Vineyard.
The thing that I would love for the Vineyard, this is my heart, whether it be programming that gets rolled out or the different kind of support, could we engage in some more open conversations and some very intentional planning so that our pastors feel supported, they feel challenged, but yet they feel incredibly supported in this journey. Yeah. That no pastor would ever feel alone, that they would never feel that they are the only one that is doing what they're doing, that they would always have somebody to call, that they would always have a number in their pocket, that they would always know what the Lord is speaking to them about and what he is doing, or at least suspect that to a certain degree, that they wouldn't be living life like not knowing what the Lord was actually thinking about them, and so attentive to the church, but not knowing what the Lord was saying about them, that we have pastors that are fully connected, like really, really vitally connected to the Lord.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, our host, Jay Pathak, talks to Danielle Pathak, Interim Associate National Director for Pastoral Health and Development. Let's listen in.
All right, Danielle, here we are.
Yep.
Recording.
Yep.
Podcast.
Yes.
In our home.
I know.
Which is a little weird. But, we talked about this at length with our comms team. Like, how should we do this? We have to, we're interviewing different folks in the team. We're interviewing other people. And, we decided it'd be best for me to interview you. Is this super awkward? Or
yeah.
Do you think we can pull this off?
No, we can pull it off.
We can pull it off.
This is like a night at our dinner table. So
is that it?
Right.
Well, a night at our dinner table with microphones and headphones. Yeah. So we do this a lot at our dinner table. We put microphones up. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I know you've listened to all of them diligently.
Everyone.
And you've probably memorized all the content. We've had some fun.
I'm loving them, by the way.
Are you?
They are very good.
Really?
Yes.
You think so?
I do.
That's good.
I do.
That's good to hear. Yeah. But we've had some very funny stories, interesting conversations. And as you know, we mostly tell stories. And then it'd be great to hear a bit more about what you're doing as Associate National Director for Pastoral Health. But I know your story, which makes it, maybe it would be fun if one time we should try it where we role play and beat each other. Yeah. And you can act like you're me because we've been together our entire adult life. We started dating my 18th birthday. Yeah. So, I'm hoping that I learned something new today. That's wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
What do you think the odds of that are?
0.
Really low. That's okay. It'll be fun. It'll be fun nonetheless. Okay.
I could reveal a secret or two. I don't know.
Secrets that I don't know?
I don't know.
Well, man, I'm all in now. I'm super intrigued. Okay. So just say a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, where you were born, your family, stuff like that.
Okay. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm a Midwest girl at heart, maybe? I don't know. I'm a Colorado. We've been here for 20 years, and it feels much more like home, but definitely have the Midwestern roots. Grew up as the oldest of 5 girls in my family. I'm an identical twin, so that's cool. It's been kind of a fun fact my whole life.
Just this week, we had been in the UK doing meetings with the Vineyard. And when we came back, did you hear Jasmine and Sophia's story about everybody texting them? Did you hear this yet?
No.
Everybody was texting them saying, I bumped into your mom.
It's my whole life, Jay. It is my whole life.
I bumped into your mom. And she was really awkward with me. Like, she didn't remember who I was.
I know.
It was at the track meet.
I know.
Because Dylan, Chantel's son was in this track meet. And so people just kept walking up to her over and over.
Yes.
And they were all texting Jasmine and Sophia saying, I had the strangest interaction with your mom. So anyway.
I know. It's made me slightly paranoid my whole adult life because people see my identical twin and think that I am ignoring them. So I don't know. I have a great...
In the other way around.
In the other way around, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
or I've had the strange experience of standing with Chantel somewhere. So I'm just like, maybe we're at a soccer field and watching one of the kids play, and then you go away, and then people just walk up and start engaging because context is everything. All of a sudden they're like, oh, this is Jay and Danielle.
Yeah.
And I have to like, nearly always just stop them immediately, like, wait. This is Danielle's twin sister. Yeah. And they have this kind of weird, like, it's like their eyes go out of focus. So,
you know what? I grew up thinking that I really was a little freak of nature. Like my parents had found this twin festival.
It's in Twinsburg, Ohio, right?
Twinsburg, Ohio, which nobody knows about.
No, but if you're in Ohio, it's not a huge investment to go to Twinsburg.
No. It's maybe an hour or two away. And every year, to this day, they gather multiples together to have this massive... Thousands and thousands of people come for festivals.
You should go again.
I don't know. And people would wear matching shirts, and there's pictures and contests. And I remember being horrified by going there because, of course, then you've got families that are coming with the multiples, and everybody is just staring.
But if they come with the multiples,
pointing.
Is it the other kids? Are they just kind of milling around in between?
Right, because you know about the multiples because they're all wearing matching shirts.
But then did like your other sisters go too?
Yeah.
So they're just like hanging out.
Oh, hanging
like
out,
this.
watching the freak show.
Well, I definitely want to go now. Well, because about every other conversation I have, it'd be like, oh, so you're a twin? I'd be like, no, I'm just here with a twin.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was.
Okay.
I still have a picture from it. Thousands of us gathered together, and they took it from the air. And anyway, so yeah, every once in a while I look it up and I'm like, it's still going on.
Well, we have a new goal now. I'd like to go again with you.
I had to convince my sister to go, though.
Yeah.
So getting back to the story. So oldest of five. We grew up right outside Columbus, and then we had kind of a difficult upbringing. That's part of my story. My parents did not end up staying together. There was lots of conflict, and there's moments that I do remember about my childhood that were sweet and good. And usually it was just because I was with my sisters and we would play and had built-in friendships together and all of that. But the other dynamic in our family wasn't great. But the thing that I would say probably it was one of the better parts of my life and that kind of saved me was having a great little community around us as in church. So
yeah. Well, and I forgot to say this at the beginning, but it's like some of the other folks we've had. Adam did a long interview with the two of us. Actually, it went over 2 episodes, which made me feel bad later when I saw that. But so we'll link that in the show notes too, so you can people can get a longer sense of both of our stories. But so we don't have to go into tons of detail. But I forgot to mention that earlier. So you're talking about church. Church was like really significant. And you were in a couple different kinds of church. We actually just went and visited when we were back the little Christian school you went to growing up for a minute. So that was part of your story. Yeah. But then you go to the big high school, which is the high school you and I both went to.
Yes. Yes. I grew up in so it was a fairly conservative environment with a little tiny Christian school.
Well, the photos are amazing.
Are you going to tell this story?
Which story? Of like
about me being a cheerleader.
Yeah, well, it did.
Down to my knees.
Yeah, I've never seen. Listen,
we had a strict
I wasn't raised
code,
in church, okay,
strict
and
dress code.
I haven't even been around like sort of Christian school stuff. So whenever I see the photos of the cheerleaders and long dresses,
no, it was not. No, it just went to the knees, Jay.
I don't know,
Jay.
I think it covered the knees.
It went to the knees.
I just had never seen that. I found that. Okay. Anyway.
Okay. It was a little Baptist Christian school. Okay.
Well,
it was
fine.
Very conservative. We sung hymns and there was no dancing and
we
were not allowed to
outfits.
do naughty
and did
things.
you had like sleeves to the elbows?
Yes. Jay.
Sleeves to the elbows. I mean, it's okay. It's fine. I just
Okay.
had never seen that before.
So then
So you go from that to...
So then went to public high school, and that's where I met you. It was right outside of Columbus, and then went there, and my twin and I were ecstatic.
Why?
We could go to public school because we were so tired of being in this small, little conservative environment.
Well, in a big high school. So each of our classes
Huge.
were 400 plus people.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a big school.
And I remember being very, very excited about all the different classes and being able to learn languages. And
Well,
honestly, it was the boys.
I was going to
I know,
say,
it
you
was
were
the boys.
going to try to
really,
leave that
really
off.
needed more people around me.
Specifically
Went from a
boys.
class of 30 to 500. So.
Which it turns out that worked out in my favor.
Yes, it did.
So you go to high school and at the same time as when it was the sort of height of your family shifting.
Yes.
And it's a little bit before that you end up going to the Vineyard.
Yeah, probably in 8th grade, my family ended up, we tended to hop around to some different churches every few years. So we ended up going back to the Vineyard in Columbus. And I guess my parents were a part of it when it was just starting out. And then we went away for a little bit and then came back when I was around 13. And yes, we landed and then didn't end up leaving there until you and I moved out to Colorado.
So when you went,
Mhm.
it was, I can't remember how big the church was. It was pretty small though.
The Vineyard Columbus was maybe 200.
Yeah, 200 people.
Maybe 200 people.
Yeah, and so it was
Mhm.
still a smaller church in comparison to what it is now,
Yes.
which is thousands and thousands. Who knows after COVID, but got up around 10,000 people or whatever. And talk a little bit about what the Vineyard, like what the church meant to your family in the midst of all that change.
Well, we started going when we just talked about, when I was maybe around 13. And so super tender time for a young girl.
Mhm.
And I remember it was quite the priority to see if there was any type of youth group or any type of support for our family. I mean, looking back and hearing a little bit more of this story from my mom now as an adult, we probably hid maybe a little bit, and it's kind of a weird way to say that.
The
but
church?
well, we didn't probably let people in as close as they became. It took us probably a couple years to be able to trust people. And that wasn't only just my mom, it was probably us as well. But we did have an incredible little youth group, within the church, and did, all the youth groupy things, and started to feel safe and just stable, like a little bit more stable. My mom and father, they got involved in a small group, and because the small groups, which were at that point called kinships,
Yeah.
remember that word?
Oh, yeah.
We don't use that very much
It was an
anymore.
old Vineyard word.
Yeah, it's an old Vineyard word.
Well, it's an older word than that, but it was used in the Vineyard
Well, true.
in that way, yeah.
So got involved in a small group. And I think the longer that time went on, and the more, and I keep using the word safe, but the more maybe secure or stable our environment felt around us, the more that my mom started to let some close friends into what was happening within my family and the different kind of, just the difficult things that we were going through. It was good for us. I mean, it definitely created more of a crisis in the more immediate moment, but it was really good for us because we needed to get to a safe spot because things were getting a bit dangerous within my family. So the church pastors, they intervened, they helped. It was many years of supporting and trying to get us, especially the 5 girls, trying to get us the help that we needed. So to provide a little bit more stability for our family. So I have spoken about this probably a little bit more publicly lately, but I really do feel like I owe my life to that. And I think it's really interesting being a pastor as an adult and walking very difficult situations through within, families in our own church. it's hard. I mean, it's hard as the authority figure. It's hard as a pastor to be able to enter into a family dynamic and bring peace and direction and a plan and support. It's just hard work. And so my admiration and my just respect for these pastors that stepped in, it really has gone up. I mean, it doesn't go without challenges and mistakes and all of that, but I am truly grateful for the help that they provided. So
that's your high school
yes.
years. And then you go to the Ohio State University where
Yes.
I was going because we started dating your last year. So I was the college boy that would come back to go to prom and some of the dances with you, which is funny to think back on. And then it's especially funny now, given that our oldest daughter is a senior. It's strange to think that we were dating then. But anyway,
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. But anyway, so then that's when this thing called Joshua House kind of starts happening. So tell a little bit about that, because that's how you sort of started inviting me. It was right in that same window to be in the Vineyard and connect to this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had been going for 4 or 5 years, and it is the height of the early 90s. I mean, looking back on what people consider the renewal kind of space of the Vineyard, it was very exciting.
Power. Yeah.
It was so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff that I experienced, especially coming from such a very conservative environment growing up, and then experiencing so much life and power and experience with the Holy Spirit,
Just
and
expectancy.
expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the expectation was so high. I
Yeah.
mean, we would walk into prayer meetings and Sunday services, and I could not wait to see what the Lord was going to do. I remember just feeling so excited about everything. And so when I met you, started inviting you to church, you had just come to Christ, and you were looking for an environment to call your home. I just knew you would love it. And so invited you in. And it was right around the time that this little youth group that I was involved in, well, we were all graduating, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. Most of us were staying around Columbus to go to college. And so we were trying to figure out what was that next step for us. And was that just being a part of the bigger Vineyard Columbus church? But then we didn't have any type of active young adult ministry at that moment. And there was a group of youth group kids that were graduating around that time that made a meeting with Rich Nathan and talked to him very specifically about that and said, what do you imagine for us? And is there any room to play in this? Like, would you mind if we had our own gatherings and our own service and just see what happens out of it? And he was so blessing of that. And I would love to know his thoughts about that now, because I'm sure that was, I know, because
fun conversation.
because I think you and I talked about this. We are probably the age now that he was back then, when he had, 18-year-olds coming to him in his office, asking him to be able to have their own thing. So anyways, super risky. He completely blessed it. And that was when our very first small group started as 18-year-olds. And so exciting. I mean, as I mentioned, we were going to school, to university around the Columbus area, mainly Ohio State, and then some surrounding universities. And yes, we just started our first small group. That's where we met Eric and Julia Pickerel.
That's right.
That's where we met them way back then. We basically just start doing adult things, even though we were growing
Adult things?
Well, we grew into,
What does that
you're
mean?
18, all of a sudden you become an adult, and all of a
you
sudden
mean
we're
in sort
becoming
of-
like a small group.
Yeah. Like
And we're doing,
like in the spiritual.
Yes,
got it.
yes. Yeah, we're trying to imitate what we had seen. Well, imitate, and then just really try to do what we had
it was like
seen.
a real small group.
It was like a real
we
thing.
would lead worship and teach the Bible.
Yeah, you're not
and
smashing tacos in your
pray
face
for each
anymore,
other.
right?
Yeah, no skits.
Right, no skits. No, we're
right.
full on,
Right,
we've got
totally.
the guitar, and we're singing and,
Yes.
and worshiping and praying for each other. And it was an incredibly exciting time. I think that just seeing what that small group was going to be, I think there was probably a lot of church leadership that was just watching and seeing what was going to happen. And it grew pretty quickly into a second group. and then a third group. And by that point, we start talking about having some type of a gathering where we all could be together.
Yeah. It started, I think the first one was called the alternative service. We'd have to check with Eric and Julia. I have this memory. I don't know if it's real. Memories shift over time, but I think the memory I have is of like a flyer with a guy with a mohawk. It was called the alternative service. Do you remember
on
this?
The flyer?
Yeah.
Because we were so cool.
We were so cool.
So cool, Jay.
It was so Gen X. Like, we're not you. We're Nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Anyway, that's my memory. I don't know if it's real, but I have, it's like a kind of a grungy looking dude with a mohawk, and it just said the alternative service.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was whatever it was okay. It wasn't a great service, but there was something about it being our own, that felt different. And so that grows and grows. And Eric, out of some of that work, he ends up getting hired working for Rich, and then also running the middle school youth group, which is how he and I really started spending a lot of time together.
Yes.
Was running the middle school youth group, which means we are doing skits and shoving marshmallows in our face and doing all that stuff. But still around the culture of the church. So we're doing stuff with Rich, and there's like preaching classes. And I was trying to remember what it's called. It was called, before it was VLI, what was it? It was something else. It was
goodness, I can't remember.
Vineyard something. Anyway, it was like a school of some kind, and then that turned into VLI.
Yeah.
So we're doing that at the same time.
I mean, we oftentimes have conversation about how chaotic our life was.
It was chaotic,
around that time, because we were going to school as much as we could, going to university, and we were trying to work our way through actually getting a degree. That would have been the end game. But we were going part-time and full-time, and we were working 1 to 2 to, at one point I had 3 jobs, trying to support myself through school.
Campus ministry, youth group, Joshua House.
Oh, we're serving like crazy every
stuff
night
with
of the week.
Rich, VLI, everything, like all the time.
Yeah,
and then the ministry house.
True. We were living with people down on campus.
Yeah, doing like real ministry stuff. You're like bringing homeless people in your house. And,
totally.
Whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Doing our small group
doing small group until like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Like most, more than one often. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know
why did nobody sit down with us and just say, guys, limits.
That can be also
margins.
our part of our conversation.
I know. It could be
Rich.
why we believe in the things that we believe in now about.
Well, yeah, about Sabbath and rest and margin.
Rest.
But however, there's also something about being single.
Yeah.
Even dating. We weren't married. I mean, we were married eventually in that time, and that did change a bit. We did shrink it down a bit, but there's something about being in that time that why not just go for it? And you do all the things that you can do because you can. You have the flexibility. Your kind of cost of living is pretty low. I mean,
true.
You're not. We're driving beat up cars if we even have cars, or eating horribly. There's just not and honestly, the college thing does create a lot of support. You have your health insurance. You have a gym membership effectively. You get all these different things with that. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess when I think about that time, I think it was so formative and the kind of life we could have never done another time, because we learned so much ministry in such a short amount of time, half of which may have just been utter, complete failure, trial and error, complete mistakes. I think I got my 10,000 hours. That little rule.
Yeah.
I think I got my 10,000 hours of teaching in like a 5-year window.
Probably.
Seriously, I think so. Like youth group, small groups, making up training classes for stuff. I mean, it's amazing to think about all that time. Kids camp, we go to this camp and just like never ending worship times. And anyway, it's a wild time to think back on. And I have so many fond memories. And I'm aware of how many folks that we were doing ministry with in that time, that many of whom don't really have real lives with Jesus right now, which is also sort of disconcerting and
Yes.
confusing. Like, what was that? What happened there? Because there was so much energy, but maybe the roots didn't go as deep as we would have hoped, or anyway, any number of really strange things in that time. So we go through all that window, and then we decide we're planting a church, which then leads us to where we sit literally right now.
Yes.
We show up with a few $1,000s and small groups. And so when you think about moving to plant, and I think we talked about this a lot with Adam, so we probably don't have to talk about it a ton now, but if you could go back, Danielle could go back and talk to 21-year-old Danielle preparing to move, or 25-year-old, sorry, Danielle preparing to move to plant a church, what would you want to say to 25-year-old Danielle?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
You only get 10 minutes, so you can't like do like 4 hours. Yeah. And it can't be like invest in Apple stock or something like that. It has to be like about her life.
Wait, are you talking about preparing to move or actually being out here?
Preparing to move. Like we're like a week away. So that would be like the first part of September 2001. Because, we move on the 9/11.
Right.
There's like going away parties and whatever.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this a couple of days ago because I saw a video of a guy asking another guy, what would you say to your younger self?
Mm-hmm.
My first and immediate thought would be risk more.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I did learn something new today.
It would be risk more.
You would say to 25-year-old Danielle, who's about to pack all her stuff and move across the country, risk more.
Yes.
Huh.
I would. Not because what we were doing on the external, kind of the outside that everybody could see. It was the internal.
Like just don't play it safe on the inside.
The internal kind of dialogue that was happening inside of me. And I oftentimes think about the different decades of life and how I think 20s, you are so angsty and you're trying to figure out who you are in the midst of having incredible opportunity. You've got so much coming at you. It's all about yes. But at the same time, you're not fully confident about who you are. And so I would wonder for my own self how much just wondering who I was and stepping out into so much new, but maybe, kind of pushing through, wondering what it'd be like, if I personally kind of pushed through fear in moments where I held back. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to do ministry together, which is a whole different deal. I mean, we get oftentimes asked that by couples, like, how does that work for you guys? And how does, is there any secret to it? Or, and we've had many hours of conversations about that. But I think about even church planting, we had no idea what we were doing. So we were trying things and we were making mistakes and then we were seeing successes. And I wonder how much of the internal dialogue for me prevented me from showing up as maybe my true self, is a kind of a present self. Even though I did, probably to everybody else that would even look at me, I know my own internal dialogue. So that would be the one thing that I would say. Would just risk. Because I think that the more that you risk, the more that you put yourself out of your comfort zone, you figure out who you are.
This might say a lot about our temperaments. I think if I were to say something to my 25-year-old self at that same moment, I probably would have said, trust older leaders more.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how maybe it's just by our own wiring. I think I, at 25, didn't realize how many people had already plowed the road ahead of me and had gone, everything I was going through, someone else had gone through before. And that I didn't have to figure out on my own. And I think I figured that out after going through a series of really painful moments, either with us being young parents, young church planters, not knowing how to manage our money when there wasn't any money. So in one sense, it was easy to manage no money. But in another sense, it created a lot of pressure. Early marriage, early parenting, early pastoring. I think I really just felt lost in like how to get the help I needed, because it didn't occur to me other people, there wasn't a thing that I was encountering someone else hadn't encountered. Not one thing. At 45, I can see that now. Like there's not a single thing that we went through that someone else hasn't gone through. And that's true today. There's not a single thing you and I try and figure out now that someone else hasn't gone through. And now my reflex is to go ask somebody. Like, it looks like that person might know what to do about this. I should probably just call them and say, help me think through this. But I don't know if that was insecurity. I don't know if it was unawareness. I don't know what that is. Who knows what that is? It's probably a mixture of a bunch of things. But I would, and I don't know what the relationship to that is to risk. Maybe they're not opposites, are they?
No.
At first I think they're opposites, but they're not. They're you can hold both together.
Right.
You might take better, bigger risks when you get help. You have more security to do that.
Right. I remember there was a moment a few years back when you were writing your book and with our friend Dave Runyon, and you told this story to me, and I think it was just part of the process of writing the book, or maybe not, I can't remember. But basically you were telling me a story about how you wanted to talk to somebody, like somebody that was maybe a little bit more well-known, maybe it was another author or something like that. And so you and Dave, do you remember that story? I can't remember.
Well, say the whole thing and make sure I know what it is.
But I remember you were recounting the story to me and you said, so Dave and I just kind of looked up this person's
John
email.
John McKnight. Who's like a really big deal.
Yeah, super big deal.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you just looked up an email address and you just reached out and just said, hey, I admire you. We've got some questions for you. I want to talk to you about some things.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me that story and I was staring at you. Like it was like you had grown 3 horns or something like that. And I remember thinking, how gutsy, like how absolutely gutsy that you did that. That wouldn't even cross my mind because I don't have that type of worldview. And I determined in that moment that I wanted that to change for my own life. And I think it might go back to what we're talking about right now with our like little messages that we would speak to our younger selves. There's other people that have knowledge and wisdom that we don't have. And it's okay to ask. Exactly. They want to be able to share.
They do.
At least you would hope so. They would want to be able to share what the Lord's given to them. The vast
majority do.
Exactly.
Especially in the kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, the vast majority of people who have been through painful growth experiences do want to help other people.
Yeah.
There's going to be exceptions. Or maybe, they're busy or they're occupied. So even if they can't get to it, doesn't mean they don't want to. There might be obstacles to that. But yeah, I'll never forget that, because then we spent a good amount of time with him and learning from him. Asset-based community development, incredible guy. But the thought that he was like, I think you guys are doing something that's important. I would love to be helpful to you, and flew out to Denver and did stuff with us. Anyway.
Yeah.
I wish, so again, you're right. So in the personal ways and in the professional ways, to just go and ask for help from people. And because we all know that the other thing that's true about that is we all know that not everyone's time is equal, right? So 100 hours of a bunch of people that kind of know what they're doing, helping do a project, might not add up to the same amount of influence that the right 10 minutes with one person can provide you. So when you think about that, like 10 minutes can be more valuable than 100 hours. And that's true in every arena of, at least for me, it is like, we've done all kinds of counseling, personally, together, whatever. And there's a big difference when you have a good counselor.
Yes.
like they know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And the years of experience, or maybe it's just the sovereign grace of them being able to click into your specific moment, your stage from their experience. Some of that's mysterious, but I would want to tell myself, go get what you need all the time. from whoever you need to get it
Yes.
from.
Yep.
Because, and if you can't, if whatever you're getting seems like good advice, but it's still not working, that's okay. Go ask somebody else. Go read another book. Go find another resource. Go get the help you need. So,
and if you can't, then figure out why you can't. Like why you won't or
on
you
the
can't.
inside,
On
you
the
mean.
inside.
Right.
Exactly. Like, do you think that you are, I don't know, you got it all figured out? You're better than them.
Yeah, not
You're
worthy.
too insecure.
Right.
You aren't worth it. I mean, whatever it may be, like we all have reasons why we don't do something like that. Maybe you're just a little bit more unaware, but it's worth it to be able to figure out what is the hurdle and the obstacle for not pursuing the help that you need, or not getting the wisdom and the people around you that can ultimately help your life and your success and you doing the best kind of job that you can do. So at least that's been for me. I mean, to figure out my more internal hurdles. And I do think that is probably, I mean, if I trace that all the way back, it's probably growing up in a very insecure environment, not very rooted or stable in those very formational years. And so anyways, it's just been part of my journey to just grow in kind of a security and a confidence with that.
And it did kind of feel like it was all up to you.
Yep.
So,
yeah. Well, that I just have to figure it all out myself.
Each quarter on the We Are Vineyard podcast, we focus in on a theme for all of our interviews. This quarter, the theme is power and presence. And every month, we introduce a new book or recommended resource to dig in deeper. This month, we're recommending that everyone reads Prayer in the Night by Tish Warren. Later this month, we'll interview Tish to hear a deeper dive on her book and so much more. Prayer in the Night is available through Vineyard Resources and wherever books are sold.
So let's take that thought or those series of thoughts and let's parlay that toward kind of what we're doing now in the Vineyard and what you're up to. As we think about pastoral health and the whole Vineyard, a lot of what the work you're doing right now, and really which will span over probably the next few years, is really taking that thought of how do we help pastors get the help that they need? And specifically personal areas, leadership development, care within their local churches. And that, of course, crosses over towards church health a bit. So each of these roles sort of blur and blend at certain points. But talk a little bit about, I know we've been working on securing a Lilly Grant. We've been working on a Lilly Grant from before. Talk a little bit about what you're learning about the Vineyard and pastors, and maybe to some degree what we're talking about now, how we can be helpful and be thoughtful and encourage pastors to get the help that they need.
Well, I mean, I was actually this morning, I was taking a walk and I was thinking through when this idea of care and valuing, I don't know, just valuing your own soul. When did that get deposited deeply inside of me? And it would be for you and me, but specifically for me.
Honestly,
yeah, specifically for me. And I think back to not only just my own family story that I mentioned very briefly at the very beginning, but I do think about how formational the experiences that we had when we were young adults and when we were involved so actively and heavily in ministry, and we were, oh goodness, taking advantage of every opportunity possible. Yeah. I remember the moment that our young adult pastor brought us all into a room together as a leadership team for the young adults. And I think it might have been the first time that this hit so personally. He let us know about, a fellow coworker, like a ministry partner in the faith. had made a horrible decision, actually a criminal decision towards his family. Or again, I'm sorry, he was engaged with it personally, but it was very much affecting his family. And it was based out of his own brokenness and his own life, but police were involved and whatnot. And I remember we sat there in shock, and we were like, oh my God, like we've been living life with these people. Like, what do you mean? Like they have something this hidden that's happening, not only within kind of his own life, but within their family. And why didn't they get help? Like, we just don't understand. And throughout the years, just having that happen over and over and over again. I mean, just because we're human and it's life, and people don't oftentimes live in very healthy ways. And so when we first started the church, we had very clear conversation that we did want that to be something that we focused in on and that we cared for, specifically our staff and our pastors, as we would grow, hopefully by the Lord's grace, that we would grow in that way. And so
which way?
Just developing like a bigger church, or, just like a more developed church, and then having different staff members be with us and our different team members be with us and lead with us.
I'm sorry. When you're saying to develop in that way, do you mean internal formation, not having hidden lives? Or
Well, definitely that, which I was going to get to in just a moment, but I'm talking about developing just around us, like different leadership structures.
Oh,
and then,
you mean just for us?
Yeah.
Got it.
For
Now I
us,
understand.
that was always a big priority, to have that embedded in the DNA of what we were building, like for our church. Does that make sense?
Well, and us
like the
getting
high
the help we
importance.
needed.
Well, exactly. Like the high importance
That's what we
that
talked
your
about
own
earlier.
personal health and your own emotional vitality and your spiritual connection with Jesus is the most important thing. And it's going to be messy, and it's going to take a lot of work. I mean, goodness gracious, like it's not something that comes passively or something that comes easy. It's going to take a lot of work. So we knew that as we developed our church in Denver, that was always going to be a huge priority. And so over the years, when I'm kind of going backwards right now to kind of go presently, but over the years, we have tried so much in terms of the different kind of mechanics of how our staff works, how our own personal lives work, how our leadership structures work, our trainings, and at the heart of everything that we've done is asking those very, very, very simple, but yet very profoundly, like challenging questions of, how does your life work on the inside? How are you connected with Jesus? How have you made sense of your story? So the work that is in front of us currently with the Vineyard is no different from the work that we've been doing in our own local church context.
Well,
just more people.
Yeah.
It's more churches.
And I would agree in that. I think what's honestly true, Danielle, is you were way more aware of the things you're describing than I was, in that I think I was still definitely implanting the church in more of an activist, like, we just got to get this done mode, which in some ways I regret. But you were way more conscious of like your own personal health and the health of our life and our little burgeoning family. And likewise then the folks that we were gathering, our leadership team. And much like we were describing a moment ago, I think some of our own crisis and our own personal development then led into how we could lead more effectively. It's that little verse Paul says, you comfort out of the comfort you've received. So some of our own work and understanding our own stories, how we became the people we've become, how we were crisscrossing one another in marriage, and honestly, I think some of the things you're describing, watching the complete meltdown of leaders around us.
Oh, one after the other.
Put in us, and I think that lives till this day, a real godly fear, like, I don't want to become like this. I don't want to lose track of my own life with God or my own family, because we could see the consequences running through churches and families. So in one sense, I think that put a real godly fear in us. Like, we have to keep tending to this stuff in ourselves, because what makes us any different than any of these other people? I mean, we're just humans. But I think you definitely have led me in that more than, us finding that together. I think and then I think some of the crisis in our own life was us getting that work done to where then we had tools to be able to look at our teams and say, here's some things I think we should pay attention to. Emotional health, family systems, spiritual disciplines. Your training as a spiritual director. So you've definitely led me and led our church in that, and the churches that we've helped plant and lead. So I've been more of a late adopter, but that prepares you nicely for the work that you're doing
Right.
in the vineyard right now. So describe a little bit more of that.
I have a huge heart for pastors and leaders, and I think that the current moment that we are in, with us saying yes to this calling of ministry and of pastoral kind of ministry, it's an incredibly challenging moment. We are not, I don't know, we're just
Do you
not
mean
missing.
in like society?
Yeah, in society and
Oh, wow.
culture. No, I mean, for real, like it's changing. It's
Yeah,
changing so
it is.
rapidly. I mean, I read a lot, and I read about, the different things that we are being asked to do as pastors that were not normal even, 50 years ago, that wasn't part of the job description. And we are carrying a weight to what we are saying yes to. And so,
Well, there aren't many stabilizing institutions. So
right,
families aren't necessarily a stabilizing place. Schools,
exactly,
businesses,
exactly.
government. There's hardly any other like stabilizing institutions by way of friendships and ways that people join civic organizations. So
Yep. I mean, when we first church planted, we looked at each other and we were like, oh my goodness, like we had no idea that we were going to be functioning so much like social workers. Like
yes,
it sounds very silly, but I mean, we were sitting down with people, or honestly, so like a mom and a dad, like
yes,
sitting down with people, like
people
talking
our
about their
age or maybe older
checkbooks.
than us sometimes.
Yeah, talking to them about their money or about how their family worked. And so the pressures that pastors feel right now, they're heavy and they're very intense. And so I just don't know if we are giving necessarily the training that we need to give for pastors to be able to deal with such practical things, as well as, how to teach the scriptures and how to lead our staff environments. And so I think that this role and the work that's been happening even currently within the Vineyard in being able to come around more vulnerable pastors, it's very critical work. The Lilly Grant that the Vineyard got a few years back opened up the imagination, I believe, for the Vineyard. Like, oh my God, there's actually people that will pay for this to be able to come around and provide this support in terms of, the emotional support and the friendship and, just looking at pastors saying, you're not alone. Like these different challenges that you're dealing with, other people have dealt with them. And so let's go ahead and talk thoroughly through that and provide the support that you need. And so even the current work that is happening and that we have applied for as of a week ago, it is using the current stats and the current kind of culture within specifically our Vineyard family and being able to craft a plan very specifically around financial health and craft a plan just saying what would be, well, starting with the imagination, like what would be the healthiest kind of version of a pastor, a Vineyard pastor as there could be, and then backing all the way up just saying what would be the plan to be able to get a pastor there. So
wait, hold on. So the previous Lilly Grant,
yeah,
let's do it in two parts. So
okay.
The previous Lilly Grant money was helping with coaching within certain kind of subsets and groups, right?
It was providing pastoral care for more vulnerable pastors within the Vineyard. And so, it's looking at pastors that of different colors and women pastors.
Yeah.
Pastors that maybe were a little bit more ignored or neglected kind of within the system as a whole. Pastors that maybe weren't easily seen.
Less represented.
Right. And so people could apply for very specific cohorts
so
to be around people that were like them.
Spiritual formation, coaching, that went for a year?
It'd be a 2-year cohort.
And so that's one of the things that's already been working. And do you have a sense of, go ahead.
I was going to say the numbers for that.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I can't remember what the numbers are.
I think by the end of these different cohorts, in these different kind of 3 modules that they've been going through or whatever, I think it's around 130 pastors.
So 130 of our 554 churches in that set of modules with Lilly, which is amazing. And now we're applying for a second grant that does some work around financial health. So talk about what you've been learning, first of all. And then sort of what we're proposing.
Well, I've been really grateful for the opportunity, even though it was so interesting because the opportunity has come at a time that we've had a lot of different things that we're looking at on our plate. We're trying to establish this national team. We're trying to step into this national director thing. I mean, there's been so much coming at us. And one of the biggest goals for our national team is to be able to really understand the vineyard. Just understand the stories, the different things that are happening within the different regions. And this opportunity to apply for this new Lilly Grant came in the midst of us having this kind of more larger desire to be able to understand the vineyard. And so the one thing that I want to say before I start talking about even more the particulars would be I have an immense admiration actually for vineyard pastors because the amount of story that we as a small little Lilly team have listened to, and it's not just the data. The data is interesting. Like the data is really, really interesting. We found out about a very large percentage of bivocational pastors that are in the vineyard. I mean, much higher, I think, than we suspected, which presents different challenges and different ways to be able to support bivocational pastors. We have found out a lot more about our Lavinia pastors. I mean, so the stats are interesting, but the one-on-one stories of sitting down and hearing the stories of 10, 20, 30 years of pastoral ministry with a couple and hearing about all the different challenges that they went through and the amazing resilience of people, of being in small churches that have been in more rural areas, being able to look at their family unit and having to make decisions about what they can afford and what they can't afford, having pastors that have sadly not had insurance through their entire pastoral ministry. We've discovered, a great gap, which I don't think is a big surprise, of just retirement within our vineyard family, of just pastors not being fully ready to be able to retire. So we have some very interesting challenges in front of us that hopefully, if we can get this seed money to be able to invest really deeply in financial health, that we can make a difference in that.
So this current phase has been investigation unto the end of the application.
Yes.
And what this has done is enable you to see a lot of things going on, like what you're describing.
Yes.
You're seeing lots of bivocational things, lots of people that maybe didn't have savings, or some who in 20 or 30 years didn't really know how to work with their boards.
Yes.
Like their boards didn't really have training. Like, how should we provide, for example, raises or health insurance or retirement? Then again, this isn't to blame anyone. It's just looking at the hard numbers. This is what it is. And that some of this is, so in light of that, knowing that that's the landscape, lots of pastors that haven't known how to prepare for retirement, lots of pastors that have been sort of behind and maybe kind of getting even their raises that would match inflation, for example, or they've been bivocational and unsure of like how to make all this work.
And Jay, even to the one thing that we uncovered over and over and over again would be pastors that don't feel confident even talking about money, like with their churches.
How do I even tell people to be financially generous on behalf of the church?
Exactly. Right? And the generosity piece is huge, because the generosity would be above and beyond even the call for tithing. So we just heard stories over and over again of people that were like, I don't feel confident doing this. And I really would love some coaching and some help in that.
Right. Yeah. And so some of that is preaching sermons. Others of it is working with what does it mean to have leaders, members, even discipling folks that have been given gifts of giving. Like there's people that have the ability to make and give a lot of money. So what would that mean in relationship to a local church? You're right. A lot of that's coaching that people are saying, at least from what we're discovering from the interviews and surveys and all the things you've been doing, people going, I don't really know what to do here.
Yes.
And so with that in mind, we're filing for this grant that would enable us to take some next steps, which, by the way, it's worth pausing and just saying how grateful we are for Lilly and their generosity to the vineyard and to the larger body of Christ. I mean, there are institutions all over the country, seminaries and churches and church movements and pastoral care initiatives that Lilly is just being radically generous with to help create seed money like they are for us, to begin to start processes that hopefully will have generational impact. Not just kind of a moment where, hey, maybe we can help a few pastors, but we can reset some culture. So we're super grateful for Lilly, what they've already done, and hopefully they can help us with this next step. But even if that doesn't come through, man, we've learned so much in just this little bit on how we can get our heads and our hearts around what the vineyard is financially and pastorally. So talk a little bit about what let's assuming we secure this grant, what our proposal, what are the different parts? And I know it can adjust and I know it'll shift based on what they give us. And so there's only so much detail we can go into. We're not making promises right now because we might not secure it, or we might not secure as much as we want, or we might have to reallocate components based on how things change. But just so people can get a sense, because I think it is exciting if you're a vineyard pastor or you're a pastor or you're in a vineyard church, to be able to hear sort of what's in the heart of the vineyard and what we're trying to chase after a bit.
So we have proposed that this would, again, be a cohort model where I think that that's working really, really well. Mm-hmm. And we are loving the way that it's looking in that first kind of Lilly, work that we've been doing that's existing right now in terms of pastoral health. So we're going to adopt that. We're going to keep that same cohort model. Mm-hmm. We're going to open it up to 3 different cohorts with different kind of groupings kind of within that. Prayerfully next spring, if we can get this money, and it would be a 2-year thing. And so we would work in a quarterly system where you not only would receive some professional help in terms of some certified financial planners, which has been worked into this budget that we have presented, but then we would also have very much of a communal kind of aspect to it where people are connecting with each other around their financial struggles and their wins and that sort of thing. And the reason that the communal piece or that kind of connection piece, I think formally we call it connection groups that would be a part of this cohort. The reason why that's so critically important is because the topic that we are taking on is so shame-filled. And that was the one theme that came up over and over and over again in our interviews would be people feeling immense amounts of shame, which isn't anything new. I mean, we know that even culturally that to talk about, sex and money is the most shame-filled things that people can talk about.
Well, and ironically, in our current cultural moment, people would be more comfortable talking about sex.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. So
the cohorts hopefully will create a safer space, connection that you walk through the process with people, not just experts.
Not just
coaches,
an expert, right? Which the expert piece was really important. At least it was actually for our little group, because to have somebody come in and be able to teach or to be able to come around and coach in a really professional manner felt very vitally important for this topic.
Yeah.
So we had not only have the professional, but we had the connection piece, which was really attractive to Lilly. They love that. They love that you're not just taking a person out of their environment, training them and then sending them back in, but that they could also have that like wrestling through, hearing other people's stories. And we're going to be addressing in the midst of the cohort, not only because the main emphasis would be on the pastor's personal health in terms of their financial kind of well-being, the pastor and their spouse. We have made that part of the program that they would both be involved together. But then a second and a third piece, which felt important through our research, would be that the pastor and the board receive training together, that there could be some open dialogue, that there could be some experts that come in to be able to help, provide a little bit more training so that boards felt more confident being able to talk about finances as well. And then the third piece would be congregational help. And so having some experts or some people kind of mentoring in the vineyard, coming around these pastors saying, there's ways to talk about what's happening inside of you internally and being able to translate and into your work and into your church environment. So we're going to hit on those three kind of pieces: the personal, the board training, and the congregational training. We're going to hit on them every quarter within the cohort over the course of 2 years. So it's exciting. I mean, I'm really excited. It's all based around topic. It's a very, very good proposal, and we do need people to pray for it.
Yeah, and it's been interesting in this moment we're in with having a national team, because the amount of kind of, I don't know, just time and energy we have between our SRLs, who are doing an incredible job connecting with people on the ground, our ANDs connecting with people. We're learning more about some of the internal stories within pastors and their churches, and it's enabling us to come up with really more sophisticated plans to be helpful. But it is it's an interesting moment in that many vineyard pastors are not used to this experience. It feels, even when we started to ask for some of the surveys, some of the feedback we got was, this feels really invasive. Like, why are you showing up asking us about salaries and raises and retirement? Of course, some within that raised their hand and said, man, I would love to have a further conversation, which we did tons of follow-up on those. But it's an interesting moment for our movement in that between our SRLs, making deeper connections, asking different kinds of questions, we're paying closer attention to what the vineyard is in this little moment before we just come up with a bunch of plans, and try to figure out how to work together with our pastors to do what would be most helpful for them. And then in this area, to your point, it's really tender. It can be awkward. It can be embarrassing. It can feel like we're making our boards or maybe our own church look kind of bad, which isn't the intention, of course.
Not at all.
But it requires a different kind of trust from our pastors and our leaders to say, yeah, I'm going to let you in on this. I'm going to include you, especially when we think about succession. How many of our pastors are right now saying, okay, the end is closer than the beginning? I've kind of crossed over a threshold, and now I'm looking and seeing that the end is closer than the beginning. And I need to be raising up some different kinds of leaders, which takes some work to figure out about leadership pipelines and within the whole movement, let alone within their church. But it's not just leadership developments. What is the health and the stability of my life as a pastor to be able to give this church away and, take on my next phase of ministry, which I hope retirement is. And for many people, it's a phase of ministry. It's a way of being in our family, grandparents, and people who support and strengthen. But it isn't just that. It's them also recognizing, what's the health of the church? Like, how do I help this church be given away in a way that it can thrive? Every one of us who are parents want our kids to go beyond us. We really want that. We hope that we've carried the ball a certain distance and they're going to be able to carry it further, not just maintain what we have, but hopefully go beyond us. And this is a really awkward part of the conversation, isn't it? Like, so much of the vineyard was built in pioneering, even our story, we were just talking, here's your $3,000, get out there, go for it, check in if you need something. And now we're trying to shift. It really is kind of a maturing moment for our movement. What would it look like for us to grow and strengthen and stabilize while still having a risk-taking, pioneering spirit?
Yeah.
And some of that is talking about money and talking about stability.
Yeah, I think that when we think about pastoral care, we have to think holistically about the human. And there are topics that are a little bit easier to talk about. And then there are ones that are a little bit trickier and we feel a little bit more stuck with. So I think determining what those are, whether it be the financial health, whether it be talking about marriage, having real conversations about marriage and how that works, whether it be even parenting. Our kids are facing enormous challenges in this kind of current cultural kind of context. And it has direct influence into the way that a pastor functions.
Yes.
If your family's not working, then it's really hard to concentrate on your work. So that, I think, having pastors take their own personal spiritual lives seriously, like to the point like where it's the ultimate priority. Like it doesn't get moved to the back burner. It doesn't take kind of that last, I don't know, it's just not kind of like a neglected kind of last minute type thing or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not the fumes, but it's something that you structure your whole life around, that you say no to other things in order to make that kind of appointment with yourself first. So I think the thing that I would love for the Vineyard, this is my heart, in all the different, whether it be programming that gets rolled out or the different kind of support, is we provide a little bit more beefed up structure for our area leaders, would be, could we engage in some more open conversations and some very intentional planning so that our pastors feel supported, they feel challenged, but yet they feel incredibly supported in this journey. That no pastor would ever feel alone, that they would never feel that they are the only one that is doing what they're doing, that they would always have somebody to call, that they would always have a number in their pocket, that they would always know what the Lord is speaking to them about and what he is doing, or at least suspect that to a certain degree, that they wouldn't be living life like not knowing what the Lord was actually thinking about them, and so attentive to the church, but not knowing what the Lord was saying about them, that we have pastors that are fully connected, like really, really vitally connected to the Lord. So
to one another.
Yeah. So it is kind of a both and so anyways, I mean, that would be the ultimate goal with everything that we're doing would be to create these intentional processes for pastors.
It's good. Well, and it sounds like we're getting a better sense of it all,
yes,
which enables us to create plans that relate to specific dynamics.
Yes.
And to your point, I mean, it relates to what we were saying earlier. The strength of the base and the connections you have then determines how much risk you can actually take.
Yes.
They're not opposing forces. The stronger we are connected to God, connected to one another, the more we can take risks. And that's holistic. And you're doing that work. So super grateful. It's really exciting. And look at this. We did a professional interview. Married for almost 25 years. Here we are doing this. So yeah. We comfort out of the comfort we received.
Yes.
And I'm grateful.
Very aware of that.
I love you, babe. Thanks for doing this.
You're very welcome.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at VineyardUSA. Thanks for listening. See you next week.